Let's take a look through the data in the California Protected Areas Database, CPAD, and explore how it works and what's under the hood. CPAD is a GIS database. It's managed in QGIS and some related programs like ArcPro. It includes about 49 million acres, which is roughly half the state. We publish CPAD twice a year, and just recently began publishing CCD twice a year as well. We changed the naming convention some years ago so that people could know clearly what year the data was from and used the A and B format to distinguish between the two annual releases. A is typically released mid-year. B is released near the end of the calendar year. You can learn more by visiting calands.org. Another way to look at the inventory is by the different agencies that we have holdings for. There are 1,000 agencies and nonprofit landowners represented in CPAD. It's a very large array of institutions that own all of this land. Another perspective is comparing the acres. CPAD is 49 million acres and CCD is now 2 million acres. If we look at just CPAD and ask, how much of that is open for the public to use? Almost all of it is. And the amount that's restricted in the dark yellow here means that a permit is required, it has very seasonal hours, or is very limited in some way. And the amount that's actually closed to the public is either an ecological reserve or areas that are not yet open as parks, but are owned by public agencies and someday may be open to the public. Another way of looking at CPAD is in terms of who owns these lands. So if we look at the top 50 owners by acreage, we end up with a huge percent acreage owned by the top 50 and very little owned by the remaining roughly 1,000 agencies. Through a different lens, if we look at the number of parks, the top 50 agencies by acres owned own less than half of the total number of parks, and the share of CPAD owned by the other roughly 1,000 agencies jumps up. The other 1,000 agencies are typically serving local recreation needs. In those instances, the number of small to medium parks helps distribute access to users throughout communities. The size is less important in this case. Depending on how you look at CPAD, you get a different perspective on what's important and for what reasons. CPAD has been updated and improved over decades, and along the way, we've added new attributes that make the dataset increasingly robust, as well as retired those that were both cumbersome to maintain and less useful to users. One common request is for the ability to show change in parkland over time. We are hard at work on this, but it is a long project. For example, in this image we see Clayton Ranch Regional Preserve and the year each parcel was protected. This information is very helpful, and we are working continuously to include this when it is available. In regard to one aspect of quality control, let's take a look at the geometry alignment. This would be a little tricky to see, but the red hatching is the CPAT data, the green is another agency's source data, and the blue are parcel boundaries. You can see there are differences between all of them. In some cases, CPAT is not aligned to parcel data, and in some cases, the source agency data isn't parcel connected at all. Resolving issues such as this is part of what goes into the quality control work that we do with CPAD. The challenges with CPAD really start with the fact that with 1,000 agencies, connecting with them is a continuous project for us. For every release, we can only talk directly to about 100 agencies, but we have other means of getting updates from other agencies, such as through our user feedback website, mapcollaborator.org. We also have this issue, especially with federal lands, with using parcel data as opposed to what the agency's data have for boundaries. For most agencies at the state or local level, there's really no issue. But with the federal lands, their land marking systems are a little different, and we've had some discussions about how to best balance those differences with parcel level data. Broadly, we've done a lot of work improving designations. The areas we call parks by category. This makes your work easier in querying the data. We want to make sure that regional data aggregators like the councils of government that are creating some of their own data aren't duplicating or creating conflicting data with CPAD. We really want to make sure we're working closely with them. There's the question of expanding CPAD to homeowners association lands. This usually comes up for people doing park equity analysis. If you don't have parks in the database that are within homeowner association areas, you can mistakenly think that they're park poor, when they may not be. We have approached that concern by including these on a selective basis and tagging them as restricted lands, because in general, most of them are only open to residents. Thank you, and we encourage you to continue exploring our video series.